Welcome to yet another edition of Dreamers and Unicorns Chat Show, the place where you get to meet the most happening, the most creative, the most entrepreneurial people, and talk about really what makes them dreamers, what makes them unicorns. And of course, we also sometimes have market shapers in disguise. So you'll get to meet all of them here. And today I have a really interesting person whose work fascinated me. His name is Ankit Durga. He's the co-founder and CEO of a startup called Skillr, which is, as he describes it, I'm going to read that out, a talent intelligence platform that helps organizations discover and develop future-ready behavioral skills. In addition to providing talent solutions to marquee brands, Skillr, which is the company Ankit has co-founded, Skillr also created one of the first job trackers to help job seekers find opportunities during the COVID crisis. And this is not the first startup, for Ankit. Before this, Ankit started Leap Skills, which is again a skills tech organization that has trained over 50,000 learners from underserved geographies in India. He serves as a non-executive director of IABT Foundation, but I don't know what IABT Foundation stands for, so I'm going to invite Ankit. Welcome, Ankit.
Thank you.
What does IABT stand for? I was just sort of intriguing one. What is it?
IABT, IABT is actually Leaps Foundation, and it stands for India and Bharat together. It kind of sort of tries to bridge the gap between what rural youth have available to them, and what they need to be able to build meaningful, impactful careers for themselves. So through the foundation, we mostly look at awareness building and agency building for rural youth.
You've got a lot of other impressive credentials. He's Ankit is an Inc. and Global Social Benefit Institute Fellow, and he has been recognized by MIT for creating inclusive, technology-led training solutions for the digital economy. He's also an alumnus of the Doon School, Delhi University, and Harvard's Executive Program for Strategic Nonprofit Management. Ankit, I'm very impressed. I am deeply
Thank you.
impressed. Um, so thanks for coming and talking to us. Tell me a little about this whole thing of, when you started Leap Skills. And I'll tell you
Yeah.
what got me interested. So the reason why I decided to talk to you on this particular show, very often one of the questions that people ask me is, what is the best kind of a skill to build? What subject should one choose in college if someone is just getting into, the beginning of their career? I think that question has three or four things which are a sort of a little obsolete, obsolescence built in. One of them is that these skills that we talk about, all of them have a very short shelf life. So no matter what you study in school or college, you will have to continue to study that across your life. And
Right.
a lot of things change. In my own case, I specialized in human resources. Actually, the subject was called personnel management and industrial relations at that point of time. Um,
Yeah.
the subject evolved later to human resources and now talent management, which is what I work in. You're actually a step
Right.
ahead. You work in talent intelligence. Um,
Hmm.
so that change, if I look at where I ended up, the last employment that I had was that of a chief learning officer. That job didn't exist. I mean, there was no such job when I started. And of
Right.
course, the company Wipro, which I was finally working for, which is predominantly now known for, besides of course its consumer goods, products, it's also known for its IT services. That
Right.
whole sector, ITES, didn't exist. So the sector didn't exist. The company had a different product. The job that I had didn't exist. But all through, I think I remember one of the things that people talked about is the soft skills that really matter. So
Yeah.
that's really what got me interested. Is that a thesis that you subscribe to?
Absolutely. So I think, I mean, like you rightly said, the half-life of technical skills has really reduced from what it used to be. Technology is changing at a great pace, and the one sort of skill that's been sort of consistent through all of this change. Those have been the behavioral skills, the future-ready skills that we are talking about. And there's enough sort of intelligence now on the fact that about a third of the skills that are in demand today will be completely obsolete in about 5 years time. So that's really fast pace of change. And we've also instantly undergone one of the greatest transformations in human resources over the last 1 year. So things have changed even faster than we anticipated. And what we really need to build, what we really need to be prepared for, is this change. So you can't, while you can't possibly predict everything that's going to happen in the future is volatile, the future is uncertain, the future is ambiguous, and complex. And so the one thing that you can really do for yourself as professionals, as organizations, as entrepreneurs, is to build a greater range and to build flexibility and adaptability as skills, so that you're sort of equipping yourself to take on those challenges which you actually don't even know about today. And these behavioral skills, these traits that you need to sort of build in, these are the skills that enable you to do that in the future that's ambiguous completely.
Fabulous. Of course, I'm going to sort of talk to you a lot more about specific skills, the five skills, and you kind of mentioned five
Right.
skills, and I only
Yeah.
know one of them that I know you're going to talk about. But I was quite intrigued by the fact that when you look at building a company around skill building, skill
Right.
discovery, skill building, all of that. In that
Yeah.
case, what is the size of the market? How large is this problem that you are trying to solve? Talk to me about that.
So that's interesting. There are obviously, like I said, the change that's coming in the market, the change that's coming as a result of digital transformation, automation, industries changing drastically, like you spoke about, Wipro. There is a very fast pace of change, and 80% of the workforce today feels ill-equipped to handle that change. I was doing some research, and we'd spoken to a bunch of managers and senior leaders, and 92% of managers feel ill-equipped to handle any kind of complex changes that are coming in the future. 77% of senior leadership feels that they are ill-equipped to handle this. And this, in spite of the fact that globally organizations spend about $470 billion on L&D and on upskilling and reskilling their workforce. A lot of this now is on technology. A lot of this now has been traditionally on technical skills. But there is this sudden urgency and understanding of the fact that these soft skills, these behavioral skills, are very, very important and are going to be the front runners of this change going forward. So it's largely about $470 billion industry. And even when you look at specific employers at an individual level, that's something that we learned at Leap Skills while we were working with over 200 employers, that on an average, each employer spends 40% over and above each team member's salary to hire, train, onboard, retain, engage. A lot of that, that talent value chain, essentially 40% of that, of their annual salaries is spent doing that in addition to their salaries. And that's significant cumulative cost. And given that we now have to prepare organizations, and organizations have learned a hard lesson through COVID and are settling into, the new normal, um, it'll be a huge investment and an adjustment that organizations will have to make going forward. From a skilling point of view, from their people point of view.
We have a question here from Amar, whose question is, what really is a future-ready behavior skill, and how does it have an impact on career development?
Sure. So, I mean, a future-ready behavioral skill essentially is a skill that enables you to handle, enables you to sort of handle change, equips you to handle ambiguity, complexity, and is what prepares you in a resilient way, builds you as a resilient workforce member, and gets you ready for the work of the future. So that's essentially what future-ready behavioral skill is. I can give you examples that will help you understand this better. Traditionally, for example, organizations have been spending a lot of time training and skilling themselves and their employees on technical skills, on skills that help build efficiency. But that efficiency is soon turning to resilience. So now organization design is moving from design for efficiency to design for resilience. And for resilience, essentially, you need to build skills which are future ready, which help organizations and employees to take on challenges that they have not heard of, that they don't know about. And you maybe, as an engineer, for example, you may be coding, for example, today in, let's say, React or Node or whatever the latest language today is that engineers code in. But that language is bound to change 5 years from now. That language will probably not exist, will be obsolete, There'll be better tools that are out there. We are already talking about low code and no code environments. So we will move to a place where these technical skills will become obsolete, but what you need there are behavioral skills that help you understand what are the new kind of technologies that you need to work with, that enable you to take on these new technologies, learn these new technologies quickly, and apply them at work. So skills which essentially help you in a behavioral way to adapt to complexity. That's what future ready behavioral skills really means.
And Ankit, I would also add another thing that when you look at the technical skills that are that we talk about, that whatever be the coding language, or if you're in human resource, if you are a dentist. I mean, because I'm saying dentist because I saw all the people who have joined, and I saw some interesting work that some people are doing. For example, someone said that I'm a coach for introverted people. So that I just thought
Right.
that's an interesting dimension. So they are all there. You can see them in the comments there. But I think when you
Right.
look at what is common to everyone is that the way that we engage with others, the way that we communicate our ideas, and the way that we adapt ourselves to the world. I mean, I think those are some of the behavioral skills that we are talking about. Is that a reasonable way to describe it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like I said, these future ready skills essentially are skills which will adapt to the new normal, and also are very predictive of, as a result, predictive today of future work. So that's so you may be a coach, for example, who's working with introverted people. There are new sort of theories and hypotheses that are coming around, maybe emotional intelligence, which are absolutely new, which maybe we haven't studied. But how do you sort of go about adapting to these new theories? How do you do your research? How do you make sure that you apply this at the workplace and with especially the people that you're working with? You'll need to be agile. You'll need to be flexible. You'll need to learn new things. And therefore, like, a lot of these skills essentially are applicable for everyone.
And your platform Skillr, does this appeal to the individual? Is this something the individual connects with you for, or is it something the organizations have to work with you and then they work with it? Tell me about that.
So the platform right now is completely geared towards employers. So we essentially help organizations discover and develop future ready behavioral skills in their teams. Now they use it in different ways. For example, they use it for hiring people, so for talent acquisition and understanding basically first what are the skills that they need from a behavioral skill standpoint, and then assessing candidate pools on those skills. And they're also using the platform for assessing their internal teams, evaluating internal teams, understanding where the strengths and gaps are in terms of behavioral skills, and then mapping the right people to the right job internally, as well as making skill based decisions like promotions, like giving people new opportunities, getting people to run, say, digital transformation and different processes within the company. So it's right now completely employer focused, but we are actively exploring how we can make this available to individuals, and also give them the much needed input around how do you make yourself future ready, how do you build behavioral skills in yourself, how do you sort of get the right kind of recommendations that will help you build these skills in the future.
All right. Before we get into talking about the five skills which you got me all intrigued about, there's a question here from Sanjeev Sehgal. His question is there still a premium on domain skills rather than life skills? And do you see the organizations changing their approach? What is your take on that?
That's a very good question. There is definitely a world that's changing in terms of focusing just on technical domain skills, and prioritizing these behavioral skills and these soft skills, as the question mentioned. And I think that's happening primarily because people are accepting, like I said, the change in technology. They are realizing that they need people for the long haul. They need people to be retained, and in order to do that, it's not that they need someone who is good at the role or for the role that they're hiring for today, but also will be able to take on better challenges, more challenges in the future. And that's something that we are hearing from employees across the board. Especially for young professionals, and I want to mention this specifically for young professionals. When employers are hiring today, they're not specifically looking just at technical skills. There, the awareness is much greater when it comes to skills that help you measure reliability in young professionals, trainability, if they are, for example, given the right kind of resources, who can learn really fast, who can apply these trainings at work really quickly, and also potential for growth. So a lot of the employers that we speak with say that, you know what, I don't really care that much about technical skills because I will train them anyway. it's easy to train them in technical skills, but I want someone who has the right attitude. I want someone who has a fire in the belly. I want someone who's able to hit the ground running and is motivated to learn. And I think that, that kind of awareness and that feeling amongst employers, I think, is gradually increasing.
Oh,
And there is
absolutely.
definitely a shift. There's definitely a shift in terms of priorities amongst domain skills and soft skills.
So, all right. So, I'm just going to sort of periodically summarize, just so that
Sure.
those of us who've joined a little late. So, we are talking to Ankit Durga. He's the co-founder and CEO of Skillr, Skillr. Was that just a wrong spelling, or you spelt it purposely like that?
We it was a play on words. We also want to, it's without the E. Obviously, we want to call it a killer solution for organizations.
All right.
So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. If you don't have skills, you get killed. So that's I totally buy that. Um, I'm going to sort of get started on the five skills, and I kind of,
Sure.
let me guess that I would think that the first skill that comes to my mind would be, the way that we communicate with each other. Is that a is that
Absolutely. I
something
think
that?
that's a big, yeah, true. I think
Yeah.
that's a big one. Persuasive communication, professional communication is a big one. There is definitely a lot more awareness about communication skills in the market as opposed to the other, future ready behavioral skills. And so I agree with you. Yeah, communication is definitely a big one.
Perfect. Because what I'd like to do now, Ankit, for these five skills, let's talk about
Hmm.
what does the skill mean, why
Hmm.
we sort of think it's important, and then we'll talk about how do you build it. Because eventually, I'd like to know how do I improve my skill, those five skills. So,
Yeah.
for me, the reason why I think communication skills becomes really important because if you look at the way we communicate has changed so much. The fact that we have people who are communicating via many different kinds of media. You're communicating on a given day, you're communicating on different apps. You're sort of connecting with friends on Facebook, with colleagues and friends on WhatsApp. You're looking at voice notes, there are visuals. You're looking at Zoom, you're looking at all these audio platforms like Clubhouse, which I am deeply fascinated by, and all these different things, and social media, which remains, of course, one of the big places where people are communicating. They're picking up information from there. And yet, when you think of organizations, most of the times organizations are much slower to adapt than the individual employees. And in my
Right.
view, you're looking at people who are really, the organizations are still limiting themselves to email and the written communication or their authorized platforms, some of which is legit because, you're looking at
Yeah.
safety, all of that. But there are
Yeah.
aspects in my mind, the ability to ask a question in a crisp manner is such a powerful
Yeah.
skill. I go to a
Right.
conference, you see that, sometimes a lot of times people take a lot of time to articulate what they are thinking about, or
Yeah.
the importance of writing as a skill. Is that
Yeah.
how you are defining it? And what have I left out in this whole piece?
Right, absolutely. I mean, we've covered some of the big aspects of communication, right? One is it's definitely about sharing your ideas well, coherently, but
Sure.
it's articulating. Articulation is such an important part of communication, right? Like how do you articulate it in a very concise manner, which is able to sort of convey the message. I think, I mean, beyond just communication in terms of how you communicate with people, just directly, I feel like there are some other components like verbal and non-verbal cues. Like we often miss out on the fact that non-verbal cues are extremely important parts of communication. We also don't think as much about listening, and listening is such a big part of communication. Like you said, right, bringing the right, being able to articulate thoughts, bringing people into the discussion, listening empathetically in a way that you are able to understand other people. Such a big part of communication. Also, also sort of breaking down of complex ideas. I think people also struggle with articulation because they're not able to break down a very complex idea in their minds. And that's also, I think, a huge one for communication. And I think, I mean, the scope of professional communication is huge because it's being used at the time of your interview, while you're selling your capability and your potential to your employer. It's also being used to persuade people that you're working with, bringing peers together, getting the outcome that you want. sort of sharing your ideas with them, influencing them when required. And then when you become a young leader, when you become a young manager, probably the most important skill that you need in the beginning, which is going to enable you to delegate your work, which is going to help you influence people, and let you sort of share your decisions and ideas with your teams. So it's across the board, it's across the value chain of employees, and which is why I think it gets the right kind of attention that it needs right now. And in addition to that, definitely, like you mentioned, written communication is obviously a big thing in organizations and will continue to be so.
How would you build some of these communication skills, professional communication skills, as you describe it? How would you sort
So
of do that? Can you share a couple of tips with me?
sure, absolutely. So this is something that we worked a lot on in Leap Skills, because typically we worked with college students who were in under-resourced colleges, tier 3, tier 4 cities. They obviously did not get the right kind of exposure, right kind of foundational education that will help them sort of build, say, English communication. And they used to just go into these interviews with big companies, very capable young people, have that motivation, but completely freeze because they're not confident and they're not being able to articulate their ideas well. And so one big thing that I learned about communication there is that this is always something that we hear about maths when we are kids, that practice, practice, practice. We should be told the same thing about communication skills. So what you really need is an environment that helps you practice, and you talk and you make mistakes, and then there are peers and trainers who help you correct those mistakes. But practice is also a golden rule for communication. So even if you're a seasoned professional and you struggle with maybe conducting meetings, or as a leader you struggle with communicating with your teams, the only solution to that in a big way is practice. Just put yourself out there and practice as much as possible. A couple of other smaller tips that I maybe have is something that I haven't seen a lot of people do is prep. I think preparation is definitely underestimated when it comes to communication. So spend enough time preparing for sessions, spend enough time preparing for important conversations that you have coming up. Don't make it last minute. Don't just have notes in your mind. Take notes, put it down on paper. And yeah, I think some of those are some of the big tips that I have around communication. Prep time, practice as much as possible, and take notes. That's something that we definitely don't see enough of. And for example, Abhijit, you have these sketch notes, right? That's one format of having that recall value and understanding a concept well, breaking it down, and that I'm sure helps you or articulate those ideas better because you've done that exercise of breaking it down. So there are different formats that work for different people, and I think I think that those are some of the ways in which we can build communication as a skill.
So thanks. I mean, that's super helpful. I fully agree. I think, because you talked about, a couple of things that professional communication is something you need at every stage. To get a job, you need to be able to sell your ideas, and 40% of everyone's job, every job, is a sales job.
Yeah.
You're selling ideas, you're selling products, you're selling services, whatever it is you are doing. You're trying to
Right.
persuade somebody to change their mind. You even want somebody to, add you on to something else, send you an invite to something, anything that you're doing, you're selling. So the ability
Yeah.
to do that. So written communication, how to improve that. Spoken communication, the ability to listen. That was the other thing you said. And you kind of also
Right.
talked about, you also said that prepare yourself. That's the first one. You also said that besides preparing, you recommend that we also write down, take notes, and I like to draw them out. But because I find
Yeah.
that when I read something, when I summarize in my head, if I visualize it once, so I draw it out, I will. I mean, I'll recall it many years later also. So I think that works
Right.
for me. But yeah, just simple notes also works. So that's great.
Right.
That's the first one. What is the second, second skill that you talk about?
Yeah. So we often talk about grit in a big way, and that's actually something
Grit.
that has
Okay.
grit is a skill that's in the past been associated a lot with entrepreneurship, and how
Hmm.
entrepreneurs who are building organizations and who are obviously going to face a lot of challenges, how they need grit as a primary skill. Grit essentially means passion and perseverance. So how do you sort of identify what you really want to work towards, and what your passion is, and then how do you persevere, how do you make it through obstacles to achieve long term goals around that. So that's what grit really is. And I obviously have my grit has been tested over and over again as an entrepreneur over the last 8 9 years. I remember my one of my favorite stories, personal stories about grit, is how we were actually rolling out programs for skill training for college students in Panipat in Haryana. And this was a really small college, under resourced, did not historically ever get any placements. And we'd come in here and we'd said that, we have a track record. We've been working in Haryana for the last 4 years. We have a track record of over 90% placements. We will help you guys get jobs. And of course, there were multiple challenges. There was an aspiration issue. People were not aware of private sector jobs. They wanted, government jobs. And we were sitting there in blistering heat. The college had given us a small table and a chair outside the classroom area. And we were sitting there in the heat, in the sun. This is August, so it was really hot. And four of us were sitting from the team, waiting to get admissions. And we sat there for about 10 days and we got 9 admissions. We'd actually gone and prepared for 120. So that was a huge hit, and it challenged everything that we thought about our work and everything that we'd showcased, everything that we worked hard for. And there are many days, many instances, many angles in which what you really do is attacked on a regular basis when you're an entrepreneur. But I do think that, for example, COVID challenged us at so many different levels in whatever job we may be. And I think what really sort of got us through is our own personal grit. And that's what it really means: the ability to think about long-term goals, think about your passion, and then make meaning out of obstacles, right? Like, how do you sort of make lessons out of your obstacles that you're facing, the challenges that you faced so far?
Brilliant. Oh, that's just so powerful. There is, of course, Angela Duckworth, who I once interviewed for my website,
Absolutely.
and it's a lovely
Awesome.
interview that I had with her. And she talks about grit a lot. Um, and
Yeah.
just, for me, it is just the ability to hang on tight despite how bad it may seem. And
Yeah.
in some sense, there is also a sense of optimism built into it that I will get through, which
Yeah.
is sort of
Yeah.
built in. So
Yeah.
that's really powerful that you talked about grit as an important element. So
Right.
you talked about a couple of things. If I were to summarize before I ask you for tips, you said grit is the ability to hold on to long-term goals, and sort of just pursue them, make sense
Yeah.
of of all the obstacles that come in the way, without
Right.
really getting disappointed, and just being able to navigate and just stay the course until you hit that achievement. One of the best examples of grit is, of course, when people pursue their PhD. They're working on a vague problem. A lot of times it changes shape, all that, and still to be able to go through year after year to pursue that one
Right.
goal that you will discover something. That to me is a very good example of grit, but there are many others. How does one build
Yeah.
it? I mean, is this something one can learn, or is this something you're just simply born with? You have it or you don't have it. I know as an
Yeah. Yeah.
entrepreneur, that's one thing that gets tested. For me, I can totally
Over
relate
and
to
over
that,
again.
over
Yeah.
and over
Yeah.
again, every day. Yes.
Yeah.
But how does one build it?
Absolutely. So, I mean, since you mentioned Angela Duckworth, she's obviously done a lot of work around this and has spoken about how grit really is a muscle that can be built, and it can be built, through in various ways. And since we were talking about examples of grit, and you mentioned PhD, I think an everyday example for this would be, I see this as going to the gym. Right? There are so many people who want to work out, who want to go to the gym, who have New Year resolutions, but are unable to really do that. And there are some friends of mine who are interesting, who always look for partners, who try and convince you that, hey, listen, why don't you come with me? Because if you come, then I will sort of keep at it. Maybe I'll get more of an incentive to go to the gym. So this happens in an everyday case. And that's the first tip. I feel like an accountability partner is a great tact to build grit. So it may be at work. If you want to build grit, it may be a colleague, a peer that you may be working with, a mentor or a coach that you have, who you sort of share your goals with, share your passion with. And then you build this two-way accountability where you do this for each other and try and keep each other on track. That's definitely one big way in which grit can be built. And the other one, I think, for grit, something that's really important, something that I really encourage my team to do, is try and sort of find what you really enjoy in the first place, right? I mean, there are aspects of your job that you may not enjoy. And it's really important to be able to be gritty and to be able to stick to a long-term goal. You really have to buy into it. You have to go all in. And so that in the beginning, that initial exercise of figuring out, okay, this is something that I really like, this is something that's worth my time, and I'm going to be investing my energy and time into building this and chasing this goal. I think that's something that we don't do as much. We don't sort of question that process as much as we should. So I feel like thinking about that, making sure that you're aligned with the long term goal, making sure that you're going in all in, I think is really important. And then getting different ways, different tacts to hold yourself accountable to that is one big way of building it.
There's a question here from a viewer. Sachin wants to know, what can an introvert person like me do to get into groups of people and blend with them whenever needed without losing the essence of being an introvert? So, how do you sort of learn to connect faster? What is your tip for that? What have you seen people doing?
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like I feel like there has been historically the stigma around people who are introverts. I think that's being an introvert is absolutely not something that should be stigmatized. Some of the things that I feel like, I'm an introvert at many levels, and I feel like the one thing that I do to handle that and to take care of that is find common ground. I think common ground is extremely important. There are people who will have common ground with you, who you will build, you will be able to build rapport with everywhere you go. It's just about having one-on-one conversations as opposed to group conversations, getting to know people better, finding out people who you have common ground with, and then using those relationships, those equations as anchors at the workplace, instead of constantly feeling this need to be an extrovert and get along with everyone. That's not necessary. I think if you have one-on-one conversations and understand what your common ground with different people is, you will find anchors in those relationships and equations, and build those equations. I think that's something that one should spend time doing.
Fantastic. So Ankit, any other tip to build grit? Anything else that you think comes to your mind, or should we talk about the third skill?
No, absolutely. Like I said, grit is it's again overall for behavioral skills in general. I mean this. The best way to build any behavioral skill, including grit, is to first assess, first understand what your baseline is, what you're really good at, what reflect on, what your strengths and gaps are. Seek feedback. So assess. I think that's very, very important, and then apply. So, for example, if grit is a skill that you want to build, try and understand what your starting point is, and then apply it in an ongoing basis. So once you've identified these are the three things that I really care about, and then you make sure that you stick to those and you do not get distracted and you do not sort of get disinterested or disconnected from those three things that you've identified for yourself. That is one way. And then after you've assessed, applied, it's really important to reflect. So then you sort of go back. Maybe you have mentors and coaches. Even if you don't, it's really important to sort of sit and reflect on your own, and maybe document that process and understand, okay, this is what I learned from this journey. And it's not always important to sort of stick through all of your goals. You will document that and you will see that, okay, I was not able to do these two, but I was able to do the third. This was the key difference between the third and the other two. And then you'll slowly get to know yourself better. So assess, apply, keep reflecting. So, and this cycle keeps repeating essentially. That's what the golden rule for every behavioral skill is. And this is the same for grit.
Perfect. So terrific. I mean, we have a viewer, Nikhil, who says that I love the idea of finding common ground as a way to overcome introvertness. There is a related question which I'm going to take a quick one. Anushri wants to know, how do you differentiate between grit and stubbornness?
So I actually don't think that being stubborn about your goals and your long-term vision is a bad thing. But having said that, it's really important to identify that in the beginning, right? I mean, if there is clarity of vision, if there is clarity of passion, and then being stubborn in the face of adversity, that's what grit really is. And if you are being stubborn about something that you've really gone all in for and you really have bought into, it's not a bad thing. Having said that, I think to be able to take care of that fine line between rationality and irrationality, about grit, I think seeking feedback is great, which is why when you are reflecting, mentors, guides, coaches become really important, because they are the ones who can give you an outside in view and tell you that, okay, this is the bit that makes sense, but this doesn't. So external feedback may be really important to check, for that fine line, and making sure that you do not get distracted by a goal that you may have set.
In my view, I would say that the ability to stick to a goal over a span of time would be great, but being open enough to discuss and talk to others, get feedback, learn, and sometimes change your mind about ideas is probably a good thing. It's about openness. So I think it's a balance. Too much of one
Right,
or the other is probably not a great idea any which way. But that brings me
right,
to this third question. So you talked about grit as the second one. What's the third one that
right.
we should be looking at?
We think of creativity and innovation a lot. Now, that's something that again has been a buzzword in the past. A lot of organizations have spoken about innovation at various levels, but innovation, creativity is nothing but sort of new ideas, going in with new ideas, a new approach, reframing existing problems, and trying to see them in a new light. And I think that's an important skill for the future, because there is going to be a lot of reimagining of the future, reimagining of the normal. Like you said, roles that will exist 10 years from now do not exist today. Knowledge base that will be very important, skills that will be really important 10 years from now does not exist today. So that's really important to sort of think about and understand that you really have to sort of have a greater range as a person and think about creativity, think about curiosity, think about innovation in a big way. So that's the third set of skills that I would definitely like to talk about.
So you talked about this whole business of creativity and innovation. Is there a difference in your mind between the two? How do you differentiate creativity and innovation? What would you say?
So I think it's really interesting. One is, when we were sort of going and talking from a research point of view, when we were building this framework, when we were going and talking to employers for Skillr, and understanding from them what are the skills that are important. Um, every skill that we are talking about right now has a different there's a dictionary. Almost every skill is called a different thing for different employers. It really depends on their context, really depends on their environment, their industry. So for sales, for field sales, for example, we spoke to a lot of financial services company. They're huge employers, and they always used to say that, and we continue to say that, for our field sales personnel, what we need is um, resourcefulness, jugaad. We want these people in the field sales force to be resourceful, to be able to use jugaad to get that outcome that they, or meet that target that they have. And that's essentially being able to think about what people really require. And when sort of broke it down with the employers, what really is required is different angles, different approaches, new ideas, reframing of the challenge that they have. So that, I feel like, is creativity. And innovation is a lot of that, but then sort of grounded in constraints, grounded in reality. A lot of innovation basically that happens across companies marries these. It's at the intersection of resourcefulness and jugaad, and the reality and the constraints of the environment and the reality. So I mean, I think that's the big I mean, it's a fine line, but that's the difference between creativity and innovation in my mind.
Sure, sure. And sometimes one could also say that the ability to apply your own creativity to solve a problem is the innovation aspect of it. And creativity sort of really also comes from another element of just being open to trying out many different things to some extent. But how does
Right,
one build? How does one build this particular skill?
right. I think a couple of ways, and we were talking about this earlier, and you'd mentioned how creativity sometimes. And when I'd asked you a question around how do you think about curiosity and creativity, you'd mentioned that there is this notion around ROI and how ROI is really important around everything that we pick up. That's a very important thought, because it's really important to think about building skills, building your own self in ways that are outside of what can help you get real time ROI. And that mindset needs to shift. So firstly, you need to sort of open yourself up. Like I said, creativity, innovation is about having a greater range as professionals. So opening yourself up is really important. And one exercise that I have done, and which I find really, really useful, is the what if questions exercise, right? You sort of sit and you think about any problem that you'd want. It doesn't have to be strictly professional, but any kind of concept or problem that you think about, and you go about doing a what if questions exercise where you try and think about the different angles, the different approaches that you may want to approach a specific problem with. I think that's really, really important, I think, to build this skill. And again, I mean, it just doesn't have to be internal. You can take it outside. And I feel brainstorming openly, I've seen that really impact creativity amongst teams, where we are able to sit in a group, and you really see the different angles, the different sort of ideas come about, and people processing those ideas real time and say, oh wow, I've never thought of it like that. I think that's another big exercise that um, we really need to do. And again, like I feel I want to sort of hold on to that idea of the ROI that you'd mentioned, the need for an ROI. I feel like as people, we've
Mm-hmm.
forgotten the concept of picking up things, which and doing things just for the sake of it, right? Like, I mean, there are, are we a lot of my friends right now, for example, who have always been readers, who have read in the past, now, for example, read business books, self-help books, but they've always been readers. So what about reading fiction and fantasy? And that's something that you see very little of. And there are different things that may suit a person. So opening yourself up to those experiences, I also think builds creativity and innovation.
So you talked about a couple of different things. One you said is, try out different kinds of things that you can read about, if you're reading, uh, um, also, just meeting people from different professions and different socio-economic backgrounds, different age groups.
Absolutely.
That's really a fascinating way to sort of build that. Traveling to places which you haven't seen and looking at a
Yeah.
place from the eyes of a local person, so
Local.
not to
Yeah.
go to a place and sort of be the tourist. What would the local do? How would they spend their time? I think I personally find
Right.
that really encouraging. And somebody sort of pinged me and asked this question: what is ROI? So ROI is return on investment. Is just a term that I find that a lot of times when you ask people to do that, the first question that they think about is, what's the point? Why should I do that?
Right.
Just the sheer joy of trying out something without it necessarily leading to something. And I have found that many a times when I never doodled because I thought one day I'm going to, do this professionally and do my work professionally or write.
Exactly.
I used to write letters to friends, and from there it sort of morphed into writing short stories. Some got published, some got rejected. Then you kind of, try different things. So I think just this ability to navigate and continually try it out, and so that's something I really enjoy doing. Not necessarily looking to either achieve and say that if I'm not number one in that field, I'll go away. I mean, that's a killer. It may be great for a company, but as far as a human being is concerned, that's a terrible way to think about it. If I'm not number one or number two, I will not do it. Then you pretty much not do most of the things in life. At least I wouldn't, because I'm
Right.
not number one or number two in anything. So just being able
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
do something for the pure joy of it, I think that's
Yeah.
okay. All right. So just remind me again. Let's do a recap. What's the first thing you talked about? Was how do you build professional communication skills? Then you talked about
Right.
grit as the second
Great.
one. Yeah, grit was the second
Yeah.
one. The third one was creativity and innovation.
Creativity. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
innovation, and we
Yeah.
said that there are different ways you can be more creative, basically try being open to new experiences. What is the fourth one? And I also want to just take a moment to invite our listeners that if you have any questions about any of them, love to hear your views and your comments. So keep them coming. Just introduce yourself and ask your question. Meanwhile, Ankit, question to you is: what is the fourth? What is the fourth
So the
skill
fourth
that
one,
we should build?
Yeah, it's cognitive flexibility. Now, this one sounds a little intimidating, but it essentially means in the old school kind of dictionary, it's logical reasoning or straightforward reasoning. So how do you basically build that flexibility? And the reason I think it's been called cognitive flexibility now is because now the kind of shape that it's taken is it's a lot about connecting the dots, synthesizing information from various sources, thinking about logical and actionable conclusions. So that really is what cognitive flexibility is about. And one thing that's also used, a term that's used to describe it now in professional settings, especially in the tech world, is systems thinking. Right? So how do you sort of break down a problem, break down any kind of challenge into a smaller pieces, and think about it from a logical point of view, and try and see the flow, try and see the gaps, identify what's missing, what can be improved. So that's what really cognitive flexibility is about, systems thinking. And I think one way in which you see this being applied right now is, again, entrepreneurs use this in a big way to try and identify opportunities in your workplace. If you are a techie, you may find different sort of avenues to improve something that's already happening in the organization. So that's, again, where connecting the dots, cognitive flexibility is required. And I think I would just like to highlight the difference between the two: creativity, innovation, and cognitive flexibility. Cognitive flexibility relies on a lot of prerequisite information. So it's not about just creating a new approach or reframing an existing problem, or bringing in a new idea. It's a lot about understanding the status quo, coming in with all the prerequisite information, knowledge required to be able to address a specific problem, and then breaking it down and thinking about it from a cognitively flexible manner. That's what cognitive flexibility is all about.
Terrific. Before we go on to asking you how do we build it, we have a question from a viewer who says that my question is very basic, but I want to know from Ankit sir, how should we reply to the question? Introduce yourself, Sandeep. What is a punchy way to talk about the highlights of yourself and still sort of make an impression? What would you recommend?
Sure.
What,
I mean, these are multiple leap classes that get you to this answer, but I can give you a few tips, Sandeep, if I'm not wrong. Um, so, Sandeep, I think a few things that have happened as a result of all the information that we have on available online about how to answer specific questions has led to a very standardized, one size fits all kind of answer from a candidate point of view. So, a lot of employers often complain that when we ask candidates to introduce themselves, everyone has a very stenciled, very standard answer around, my name is this, I come from here, this is my interest, I've done this in the past. And I think that honestly is it's a little, it puts off employers. So what's really important, I mean, two three big tips here is be authentic. Genuinely think about what defines you, what defines your career and professional interests. And again, this is an exercise on thinking. So you first have to sit down and honestly spend enough time thinking about what you are all about, and that's what you really have to communicate. But the second tip that I think is really important is that you have to connect yourself. You have to find that connection with the job, with the employer. So you have to also spend time knowing the opportunity, getting to know the employer, getting to know what the company is all about, and what would they look for, and then connect your authentic self with that outcome, and show them that bridge, that look, this is who I am, this is where I come from, this is my experience, and I think I'm genuinely interested in this job because I have read about your company, and I've read about the employer, and I feel like these are kind of people that you're looking to hire, and I'm a great fit. So be authentic, and also do enough research on the interviewer or the interviewer's company to make sure that you're able to establish that connection between Sandeep the person and XYZ the employer.
So, if I were to ask you this question, Ankit, can you introduce yourself, to the audience? I, of course, read out a large bio of yours, but if you had a 30-second pitch, how would you introduce yourself?
All right, so I would probably go with my background first. So I'll just break it down for Sandeep's ease of use. I would first like to talk about who I am, what I've done in the past. So it's really important to be personal. So I would first start by saying that I'm Ankit, and I'm from, I come from Dehradun. My father was in the defense services, so I've grown up all across India. I've seen different small towns, and I went to Delhi University, did my business degree there, and started my career with Ernst and Young, which is a Big Four. Realized that that's not for me. Went and quickly got into the startup space. Worked with Zomato when it was barely 50 people. Was only present in a few cities in India, and that's when the entrepreneur bug bit me. And met my co-founder Megha, who was doing a lot of academic research on skills, the skilling ecosystem. We were constantly talking about how there is how opportunity is a function of where one is born and how that needs to be fixed in this country. And that's what got us to start Leap Skills in 2013. I've been working on building Leap Skills over the last 8 years. And recently I also co-founded a company called Skillr, which is a talent intelligence platform, like Abhijit mentioned before. Outside of my work, I'm a drummer. I really like playing drums, and I also collect stamps, and love listening to music all the time. So that's kind of so it's there's something personal about your background, there's something about your work, and then you will you maybe talk about some other interest, something that humanizes you, something that sets you it makes you sound different from another person who may have different interests. And then, for example, if Abhijit is hiring me for a job, I'd say that I think the work that you've done and the work that your organization does around consulting with people who are looking for different opportunities and looking for advancement in their careers, and organizations that are looking to build resilient teams. I have a background in that. I've worked with 50,000 young professionals over the last 8 years, worked with over 200 employers, really understood the problem, the dichotomy of demand and supply in India. And I think I'd be a great value add to how you approach this problem. So then the connection. So authentic and connection.
You're hired. So completely hired right away.
Awesome.
So Ankit, I want to move to this whole thing of how do you build cognitive flexibility? If there are any tips that you can have, and because we are always we could continue talking, but we are running a little low on
Sure.
time. So two or three
Sure.
tips on
So
how to build cognitive flexibility.
yeah, quick tips. Again, we like we were talking about systems thinking. So one of the things that we do often in the organization and done a lot of exercises in the past is around mind mapping. So essentially just breaking each process down, breaking each sort of set of thoughts down and putting them down on post-its. So literally, like, the tip is just take a stack of post-its and put different parts of the solution, part of the problem, whatever you're trying to brainstorm on, put that down on post-its and look at it as different smaller parts and see where the gaps and the opportunities are for improvement. So that's one exercise. Happens a lot in design thinking. So that's one. The second one is a tool that helps me think about connecting the dots. Systems thinking is also the good old school pros and cons list. So whenever you're making a decision, whenever you're trying to approach a problem with a new solution, definitely sort of look at both sides of the argument. Approach, sort of get multiple sort of perspectives on the problem that you're trying to solve, because that'll just train you to think about the problem more holistically. So you could also use tools like a pros and cons list to get the various angles of approaching a problem.
I would add another, method that I find very useful, which is to ask myself that, take a very famous company and just say, how would they do it? For example, if you think about customer service, or creativity, just ask how would a company like Pixar approach this problem? How would a company like Disney approach this problem? How would
Yeah.
so whatever, sort of doing that sometimes gets you to start thinking like them. So that's a sort of a shift you can create for yourself. Terrific example. And now we are coming to the last one. What would be the last digital skill that will prepare us for success in the digital future?
It's good that this one's the last one, because this one is really big. I think learning agility is the fifth skill that we like to talk about. So important, and such a great lesson over the last 1 year of how you will always need to be agile, of how you will always need to learn new things. So learning agility is nothing but striving for continuous learning, continuous feedback, the ability to be flexible, adaptable, and the willingness to acquire new skills. So that's what learning agility really is about. And that's, I mean, that's something, again, in my personal journey I've faced it in a big way. It's something that I've had to develop to be able to become resilient and to be able to be future ready. Easiest example that I can give you is that I started off as a social entrepreneur. Lived in small towns. I used to live in Haryana for about 4 years. Um, and the idea that we, Leap Skills, when we started, was a completely brick and mortar model, completely offline. And then 3-4 years later, we realized that if we have to scale this, and if we have to make sure that the quality is not diluted, and if we have to make this cheaper for our students or our beneficiaries who come from really underserved backgrounds, we have to use technology in a big way. So now suddenly, from someone who was managing operations, running between centers, trying to think about how training is done in the classroom, I had to shift to someone who had to understand how an app is built, how technology is built, how should we go about doing digital learning and building solutions for digital learning for our students. And we built technology which is now used in a big way, not just by Leap Skills, while we continue to work with different teachers in different training centers, but also by other parts of the ecosystem in the Skill India mission and other skill providers in this in the skilling ecosystem. So I mean, that's something that was only possible if I let myself be agile, let myself learn new things and acquire new skills. And that's a big one, given all the volatility and the ambiguity that we are talking about in the future.
So, how does one, continue to build? Is this different from curiosity, which you mentioned? How would that be different? Learning agility versus curiosity. What's the difference?
Yeah, curiosity, like you mentioned, like you rightly put it, it's for the, doing things for the joy of it, right? And also putting
Okay.
yourself out
Okay.
there, being more open to exposure. Learning agility is an active investment in skills. So it's a lot more active in its approach. And one of the things that, for example, to think about is, this is something that we talk about in our friend circles, that is your entertainment budget as a young professional uh, higher or lower than your education budget? Because we are
Wow.
all sort of investing a lot in subscriptions in terms of Netflix and Prime and Hotstar and a ton of these other apps. But are we sort of doing like a quick check and seeing how much are we investing in education? And a lot of us are not investing as much. So a quick check is very important to understand whether you're investing in yourself actively. Very actively seek out mentors, coaches, seniors, who may be able to guide you, peers who maybe, I read in your note yesterday, who may be one step ahead of you, would be great people to sort of take feedback from. So just investing in yourself, investing in upskilling, I think, is what is really important to be agile, to build this as a skill.
Um, you know, so so I would sort of also say that you talked about as your entertainment budget, lesser than or greater than the investment that you're doing in building your skills. I would
Right.
actually have a different measure. I would say, do you spend more on your mobile phone than you do on your skill development? I think is a better thing to also ask for, because a lot of us don't hesitate to spend X amount of money, buying a mobile phone. But we'll sort of,
Absolutely.
somebody says, spend this kind of money, on attending a program or doing something, we would say, no, no, I can't afford that. I mean, that's
Right.
the way it is. So I think it's a
Right.
great piece, that you talked about. We are coming up to the end of the hour, so if I were to just simply summarize the five skills which is there, how you were telling me that I was asking if there is a way I could find out, for myself, what is it that I can do to get these assessed for myself,
Right.
and so Ankit said that, okay, you can actually go to this particular link and just click that. So I'm going to
Yeah.
just ask you, this is a free link anyone can use. So I'm just going to put this.
Yeah.
So there is a free assessment, guys. You can just jot this down. So it's https bit.ly and then you have the stuff which is coming up on the ticker. You can sort of read that and you can note that down. So, and I'm going
Yeah,
to try and see
I
if I can.
just quickly,
Yeah,
sorry,
go
I was
ahead.
just quickly going to add that. So this is, the assessment measures, some of these skills that we spoke about today, and what you will, like we mentioned earlier, that Skillr is completely employer facing right now. We, don't have individual solutions, but this is something that we've opened up. And what you will get in return is a very detailed report on these skills, where you stand, what your score is on each of the different skills. So this assessment has cognitive flexibility, which we spoke about, learning agility, grit in a big way, and creativity and innovation. So those are the four skills that we'd spoken about in addition to professional communication. Outside of these, outside of professional communication, these four is what this assessment is going to measure, and give you a very detailed report on where you stand, and also recommendations on how you can build these bases your score. So a customized report, will be given to everyone who uses this, and it's completely free to use.
Terrific. You have, Dr. Pankaj Gupta, who says it was great and highly enriching conversation. Hearty compliments. You also have Mala
Thank
Bhatnagar, who
you.
says a great discussion, excellent questions, awesome responses. So thank you very much. I mean, so appreciate your doing this. Ankit, I must say that this was an easy one for me because I always think that the behavioral skills are under leveraged, and most people just focus on getting the cognitive skills, the technical skills, which is important, but those will keep shifting. But I think the behavioral skills take a long time for us to build. So investing in them early and on a continuous basis is probably something that employers should really do to make sure that the organization stays future ready. And I think at some point of time, I would really say that you should really think about getting this set of skills available to also individuals. It's maybe I'm working in an
Right.
organization which doesn't believe in doing that. So my real recommendation, it would be that just consider bringing this to the individual. So whoever wants to do it should really be able to do that. And with that,
Right. Absolutely.
if Ankit, if somebody wanted to connect with you and find out about Skillr, can you just quickly share the links and places where you can be reached?
Sure, absolutely. I'm happy to connect over LinkedIn. My name is Ankit Durga, as you can see on the screen. So please add me on LinkedIn, and ask me any questions that you need. And feel free to use the assessment like we'd mentioned earlier. And thank you,
Yeah,
Abhijit. This was really good. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I take your point. I think it's really important for us as individuals also to be able to have access to these skills and ways in which we can improve them, because I do think that is a big piece that's missing. Not all organizations are investing in a big way. I do think that's going to change significantly over the coming years, but definitely something that we are working towards actively. To make it available for individuals in the coming few months.
so all those who are asking, can you repeat this URL again? It's right there. It's there in the ticker. You can see that. But in the meanwhile, just I really want to say thank you so very much. It was great, and it just reminded me that yesterday on LinkedIn I wrote this newsletter where I said wobbling is your superpower. When you
Yeah,
learn to
yeah,
ride the cycle, we wobble a lot. You are not steady, and that really is a
right.
sign that you are learning something. So I hope we'll all stay wobbly. And thank you so very much, Ankit. It was terrific learning from you and about these 5 skills. So it was great. Thanks a lot. And I appreciate
Thanks,
your
Abhijit.
sharing
Thank
this
you.
free assessment with all our viewers. I hope they'll get value out of it. See you
Absolutely.
again
Thank you.
next week
Thanks.
for yet another, conversation with a dreamer and a unicorn. And just the hint, it is going to be something you would truly enjoy just as much as you did this one too. Thanks. Bye bye.